Welcome to the webinar. Thank you for coming. I'm going to talk about the infrastructure funding for universities that is available at about the same time as the CINR. So this is not tied to any of the CINR projects. That was the case several years ago, but this is completely independent at this point in time. I'll go over the FOA briefly, talk about how NSUF is integrated into the FOA, why I'm here as opposed to someone else, talk about the Reactor Upgrades section, the General Scientific Infrastructure section, some best practices that are all outlined in the FOA, but should be bear reminding, some pitfalls to avoid, once again also outlined in the FOA, and then the contact information for additional questions. So as a reminder, funding for this FOA is coming out of the Office of Nuclear Energy, but all the grants and all the contracts are administered by the Idaho Operations Office. So the information for contacting, it's Andrew Ford again, is the contracting specialist for this FOA. They should all be directed to him. Technical questions, they can be directed to me. My contact information is also in the FOA. As has been the case for quite a while, there are two areas in this FOA that are available to universities: reactor upgrade to support the university research reactor fleet, and general scientific infrastructure to support teaching and education at the universities, supporting the missions of the Office of Nuclear Energy. The FOA will be available. It's not out yet, but when it is, it'll be available at grants.gov, where all of these sort of solicitations are. It'll also have courtesy copies at NEUP.gov and probably also at NSUF. Applications will be submitted as they have in recent years at NEUP.gov, and additional information, question and answer, things like that are available at that link at the NSUF website. We expect the release date to be about August 17th, probably that week. Keep tuned, that may change slightly. Applications are intended to be due on the 12th of November. Also at NEUP.gov, with an award announcement probably in June or July, expecting no later than the end of July. So the nuclear science user facilities have actually been mentioned a couple of times already, but we provide access to researchers, world-class capabilities across the US, actually in a couple of places around the world as well, but granted through a competitive process. Some of these capabilities are owned by the Department of Energy. Some of them we just actually are partners with, universities, other national laboratories, nuclear industry partners, things like that. So what we like to do is find these unique or hard to access capabilities and provide them at no cost to applicants. And because of this, this FOA is one of the resources that can be used to expand the NSUF set of capabilities. So excuse me, to apply to any of the areas in the FOA, the applicants have to demonstrate in their application the ability and willingness to join. Now, you don't have to be a partner. You don't have to outline in the basically a partner application in your proposal, but you just basically have to explain, sure, we can become a partner, and here's how we would do it. Here's how outside researchers would get access to this capability. And then, if through this whole process, your application is selected for award, the NSUF may determine that they would like to add this. So then your institution would be invited to become a partner. You don't have to be, but that's how the process would work out. Any questions on this particular thing can be directed to me or to NSUF as well. So as I mentioned, the FOA is organized into research reactor upgrades and university general scientific infrastructure, two very completely separate areas, although they, for the most part, share the same funding money. Reactor upgrades, this really isn't any different than last year. We expect the maximum budget for the entire FOA to be about $5 million. And in either reactor upgrades or GSI, it's actually possible to have a maximum award of the full amount. It's probably pretty unlikely. That would have to be an amazing proposal that fulfilled a national need, but it's possible. The awards can be up generally to about $1.5 million. Those are some of our bigger proposals, control console upgrades for research reactors, that sort of thing. In general, though, they expect to make some smaller awards. Of that $5 million, generally it's split about 50-50. So they expect about $2.5 million allocated for this area. All that can change, but these are the expectations. Generally, the period of performance for this is going to be a year, but please ask for what you need. There's really no downside. If you're going to do a control console replacement, you think it might take 3 years, ask for 3 years. We've seen a lot of problems come up when the opposite happens. People try to cram a very complex project into a very short period of time. And even things like with COVID, contracting could be a big deal. There are times when the contract isn't even let for a year. And that there are challenges with extending these things after that. So the only institutions eligible under the reactor upgrade section are the educational reactors fueled by DOE, and there's a list in the FOA. It is the same list as in the previous year's FOAs. So you can go back and look at that. Now, some clarity was added this year. Each institution is permitted to submit a single separate application for each research reactor. So you can't submit an application if your institution isn't in that table. But if your institution happens to have 2 research reactors, and there's one of those, they can submit an application for each reactor. The review criteria also haven't changed since last year. The number one, the main criteria is safety and security of the reactor. So you see 55% of the technical review will go towards that. The safety, performance, control, operational reliability of the research reactor. Actually, the fleet has come a long way in the last 20 or 25 years, but that's still the number one concern. And then impact, utilization, and execution. How much more, what new research you'll be able to do, how many people, students, faculty, external users are accessing the research reactor, and how that will change if your application is funded. And then actually at the bottom of the list, but still very important, is execution. How are you going to carry this out? It's an important part of the application because it lets the technical reviewers know if it's a relatively simple, we're just going to buy a new continuous air monitor and we're going to install it, it's the same as the old one. That's pretty easy. If we're going to build one or we're going to do something that requires facility modifications, then it's important the reviewers can see that you actually have a plan and the ability to carry that out. Really, the worst thing that can happen is that an application gets funded and then it fails on execution. That doesn't help anyone. So, all of these sections are important and should be addressed in your application. A particular focus area this year is spare parts, spare channels, and such for control consoles. We learned this last year that one of the major vendors is leaving the market in a few years, and they're available to supply spare parts right now. They're taking no new contracts for full systems, but they did also warn essentially they might run out of spare parts. So it is very important that that these needs are met while those things are still available. General scientific infrastructure is really the other side of the coin. Once again, it can get the full amount of the funding if such a thing were desirable. Although in this case, the anticipated award size is smaller, usually around this $250,000 mark. Above $250,000, there is a cost match requirement, 1-to-1. I'll cover that in a little bit more detail. The period of performance, once again, is generally expected to be about a year, but ask for what you need. The challenges in getting a no-cost extension and how that affects you are really not worth not asking for the additional time up front. General requirements for GSI, equipment, software, instrumentation, non-reactor upgrade requests. Every now and then we see an application that probably should have been in the other work scope. They won't get moved, so put your request in the right area. Research and teaching are certainly covered under this, so that's a challenge that we often get. It is difficult to review a pile of research proposals next to a pile of education proposals, but they are both perfectly appropriate in this FOA. And then, of course, as I mentioned with NSUF, not just within NSUF, but for all applications. Requests that support sharing by multiple institutions, multiple schools or colleges on a single campus are encouraged. The idea is if we have the biggest impact for the dollar that goes into this, that's certainly desirable. Focus areas for GSI. Once again, NSUF is in here. We do an annual capabilities gap analysis report that surveys what's out there, what's available, and what we think the R&D programs are going to need. And this is one area that we can use to help try to fill that. So for 2021, specific areas of interest: in situ radiation enhanced corrosion capabilities. Certainly this can be reactor, this can be gamma, this could be ion beams. There are some of these things that exist, but it is certainly not widespread. And particularly with the use of non-light water reactor coolants, this may be a bigger area in the future. Nuclear fuels and materials characterization, including high throughput characterization, as an area of interest. Non-light water reactor environment material testing capabilities. So not just radiation enhanced corrosion, but stress corrosion cracking, other types of testing in non-water environments. And then of course, as always, capability to perform work on radioactive materials. Beta, gamma only, alpha contaminated or alpha bearing materials should be handled separately. So you can apply to any area. These particular areas are things that we're looking for to fill identified gaps. An excluded area, Simon Pimblett covered the high performance computing that's available through NSUF. Because of that significant investment, we do not like to see any applications for purchase of high performance computing equipment. Actually, we're saying scientific computing equipment, clusters, nodes such as that. Because access through NSUF and through INL HPC comes at no cost. Review criteria here you see are slightly different than for reactors. We still have impact, utilization, and execution, which are all important. Also in this case, we have NSUF priority. So those areas that were mentioned in the previous slide, those would factor under this area. Something special in the case of GSI, cost matching is required, 1-to-1 above $250,000. So here, the example given, if the project that you applied for, the total cost would be $350,000. The DOE share that the federal government would pay would be $300,000 in this case, and the university would be required to put in $50,000. We expect, as because of this, most awards are around $250,000. But awards or requests that come in higher than that are also regarded because they can leverage the federal government money to buy some really spectacular equipment. Cost sharing is not required, but certainly is encouraged. Once again, if you contact me for any of the technical questions, that's great. I can't help you with cost sharing, cost matching, contracting. In that case, contact the contracting officer at the Department of Energy ID. Some best practices, I'd just like to briefly go over. And these are based on things that we've seen in the past and also ways that we would like to see proposals and applications go in the future. So infrastructure should be individual, discrete, and definable items or capabilities. So we want to see things that will help the universities attract high quality students, build education or research capabilities, and enhance the institution's ability to carry out Office of Nuclear Energy relevant research and development. So any of these things are something that we really will look forward to seeing. We'd like to see applications that focus on a single synergistic goal or capability. So not so much a Christmas list of here's 10 things that all add up to $250,000. That is certainly, you have no problem actually submitting that application, just saying it's probably not going to be reviewed as well as an application that focuses on a new type of research or something like that's important to Office of Nuclear Energy. We also ask you try not to duplicate existing capabilities. So in some cases, that makes perfect sense. We would be the only institution in this geographical area that has this capability. But if you just want another one of these things, that doesn't really add to the portfolio of equipment that's available to Office of Nuclear Energy. So take a look at the infrastructure database. Obviously, applicants probably have a good feel for things in their own area, and try not to duplicate existing capabilities. If you are going to do that, then please explain why this is a necessary duplication. And then finally, specifically list DOE NE R&D program relevance and what programs. If you say this new capability is going to support Office of Nuclear Energy goals, well, which ones is it going to support? That helps very much in the review process. Pitfalls on this. Once again, these are listed in the FOA. Applications cannot include hiring or human capital costs, so labor, things like that. That's actually been brought up several times in the past. Currently, it is not allowed. It also can't include the cost of routine operation. So you can't say, well, I'm going to buy this new equipment, and I also want you to pay it for a year's worth of its operation, the salary of the person who's going to operate. That's just not available under this FOA. No non-standard installation costs, and these often also translated to construction. Oh, I need to build a new building to put this in. Or I need to, in retrofitting the room to put this in, I'll also need to upgrade the fire alarm system to meet a new state law. That's probably not going to be viewed very favorably. Institution-specific costs, things like the example of training the vendor to enter your facility, those also aren't available. And of course, then upgrades to increase operational profit or commercial activities aren't allowed. But that's a pretty small subsection, but it also should definitely be avoided. And once again, just ensure you have the most recent version of the FOA. This year's isn't out yet, but when it's out, it will be available at grants.gov and at NEUP and at NSUF. So all of this stuff is copied out of a draft version of the FOA. You'll want to make sure you have the current one. Contact information, as everyone else. You can contact me for technical information. Obviously, most people have my email address, but the nsuf@inl.gov will come to all of us. There is historical information, questions and answers available at that webpage. Actually, I've got Trevor's name on there, but it's Andrew Ford is actually the contracting specialist, and it's the same as in the CINR. So that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Brendan, the first one. What is the due date for the infrastructure proposals?
Okay, so this is expected due date. Once again, when the FOA comes out, it will have the actual date, but we expect it to be the 12th of November.
Okay, and can a current PI on a reactor upgrade award submit a FY 2021 proposal?
Absolutely. And I guess I probably should have added this. There was a preclusion on that. It's actually been gone for several years, but there is no preclusion to keep someone that's got an open application from applying.
Okay, at this time, we don't have any more questions. Let's wait a minute or two, and then we'll break for lunch Eastern time. See if anything else comes in. Okay, Brendan, here's a question.
Okay.
Are only off-the-shelf items available for funding, or can you fund custom built pieces?
Absolutely. We funded, of course, I certainly recommend you go to the NEUP NSUF websites and look at the previous year's awards, because that'll give you a good idea what was thought highly of in previous years. Last year, we funded a reactor upgrades proposal where the university intended to build the control rod drive mechanisms on their own with a local vendor. So, but please, if you want to do that, explain how you're going to do it in the application. Things like, quality assurance. You don't have to write out the whole program, but please try to let the reviewers know that you've thought of everything, how you're going to do it, and also very importantly for reactors, how you're going to get it licensed.
Okay, for sharing our facilities as a partner, if we are funded, can we recoup expenses and charge a user rate?
Absolutely. If it's through NSUF, the NSUF will pay you for all your expenses. Obviously, talk to us about that. It's just about, we understand, if it's a professor that has this equipment in the corner of a laboratory, it's not necessarily very easy to get outside people in, but it is something that is thought of very highly. But of course, you can recoup your expenses. There's no intention that you do this for free.
Okay, is there any desire to avoid repeated equipment, i.e. PIV systems, flow imaging at different institutions, such as if a few universities already have been awarded a GSI for a PIV system, but this new institution wants to propose one as well?
So certainly we would like to reduce duplication, but there certainly is an understanding that basically explain why you need your own, and that very well could be we're the only people within 1,000 miles that have one of these. I'm not going to get my students on a plane to fly to this other place to use them. Now, if it's research only equipment, then maybe that's a little bit harder to explain why it has to be at one place and not another.
Can renovation of hot cells be considered in a reactor upgrade proposal?
Certainly, once again, that sort of thing has been funded in the past. It should have, once again, a good explanation of why you're doing it and how it ties into the reactor. One of the things that you should try to avoid in reactor upgrade proposals are things that just happen to be in the same building as the reactor. That's not a very good tie-in. The reactor upgrades had been very popular for these expensive proposals because there was no cost match required. But the reviewers are certainly savvy enough to say, well, what does that have to do with the reactor? In many cases, it has a lot to do with it, but you'll need to explain that.
Is there any restriction on the number of co-PIs?
No, but certainly you don't want to explain why you have a co-PI. Since this is either buying a piece of equipment or building and installing a piece of equipment. If the co-PI is there's just a person who's going to use it, then feel free. But no, there's no restriction that I know of.
Okay, follow-up question. Can a GSI that would involve multiple pieces of equipment be proposed that would be under the $250,000 budget recommended?
Oh, certainly. What I talked about before is there's no limit to what you can actually apply for. There are things that are reviewed better. If Professor A wants one thing, Professor B wants something completely different, unrelated, and the same with Professor C, those are not going to be reviewed as well as even 3 professors that want to all buy things that go towards one laboratory or one research goal. But you can certainly apply for multiple pieces of equipment in any case under GSI.
If a PI is considering a custom design, how far along should the design be before submission?
Well, that's up to the PI, but I would recommend that you feel you have a good design and that you explain it and be very clear in the proposal. But there's no limit. But this is not a development call, so this is and so we wouldn't have funding through this call to pay for, say, a firm to figure out how to build something and then to build it.
Okay, next question. Does the non-LWR environment material testing capabilities include material characterization instruments such as DSC calorimetry, I think I said that wrong, or TGA mass loss?
Sure. That, yeah, like I said, we're trying to fill in gaps that we can see that exist, and really there's not a lot of that going on, particularly for irradiated materials. Now, it doesn't all have to be for irradiated materials, but those are the things that we think are special.
Okay, if the PI of some current general infrastructure project has a good idea for another equipment this year, is he or she eligible to apply for this year's general infrastructure FOA?
Yes.
So we'll be back at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.